Chapter 2. The Crannog. "They've all gone at last," sighed Ewan McKinnon, assistant warden of the Crannog Summer School for Artists, as he made his way down to the old boathouse on the beach that served as his temporary studio. The experiment was over. The students returning back to their colleges seemed satisfied by 3 months' retreat. His head was spinning with all he had learnt from Sandy Thompson, a brilliant maestro who'd torn his work apart, made him reassess his ideas and left him raring to start on some fresh abstracts. Fetri was free of its annual visitors, the Tulloch Bar emptied of the English crews, and the peace of his beach walks with Colleen, the terrier, was uninterrupted by strangers. He needed time to process all that Sandy had suggested about his work, how to capture the tones and textures of harbour scenes, how the houses here grew out of the landscape. He wanted to capture the isolation of his community, the vibrant colour of it all, so that he could go back to the mainland and continue his studies with all these visions still in his mind's eye. His head was spinning with ideas. What was needed now was peace and solitude. Not that Ewan had any quarrel with the sons and daughters of Fetri for returning each season when the schools were closed. The annual invasion of swallows flocking back to their breeding grounds with new bairns and aged parents, cramming onto the decks of the Pride of Argyll ferry for a first glimpse of Colfetrish harbour, and Sandy the Polis waving them ashore was only to be welcomed. They were family, inborn bairns. But they were all but gone now before the gales stopped the ferries. His head was spinning with ideas and he wanted no disruption to his quiet routine, for there was real work to be done. Jo had taken up a temporary post, helping out with the infant school. She was a great help to the cook at the Crannog, but needed to fill her time in her own way until he was ready to return south. It had not been easy for her this last year. They had been travelling to Italy when she'd lost the baby suddenly without any warning. The wee boy was born too soon to live. She named him Andrew John, after their fathers, and they buried him in a little hospital close to Milan. She took great comfort from the busy cemetery with waxed flowers and pictures. "He'll not be lonely there," she wept. And Ewan felt it was all his own selfish fault for dragging her off on one of his restless sprees. She was a saint to put up with his single-minded determination to cram years of neglected education into a few months living out of a suitcase. Taking the post on Fetri seemed only fair so Jo could be close to her family and recuperate. They were told there was no reason for them not to conceive again, but nothing was happening. This time they would stay until she was ready to leave. He owed her that, but he felt uneasy staying on. The past cast its long shadow. Women and islands could drive a Highland man mad, was the old saying. Jo seemed to enjoy living in such grand houses and meeting all the artists. She acted as temporary housekeeper to a bunch of absent-minded, scruffy students of all ages, shopping, giving orders to the cook, but she was happiest around children. Ewan parked his battered old bike on the gravel, making his way down to the boathouse, set neatly on one side of the cove. Here he could work free from interruption. Jo would call down after school to bring tea in a flask. He smiled to himself, unlocking the boathouse and setting up his work for the day. He lit up his pipe and looked out over the beach to an expanse of colour as far as the eye could see, a delft blue sky touching an opalescent sea, silver sands and pea-green macher dotted with chestnut cattle. Some would call it predictable, a chocolate box landscape, but he was not going to paint like a photograph. He wanted to capture the scene through sunlight, capture the essence of light on the sea. His quirky seascapes were beginning to fetch a decent enough price to keep his shelves lined with books and a bottle of best Islay malt whisky. Fetchy was more of a connoisseur's taste. An island flat, delicate and full of light. In June, it shimmered with sunshine. In winter, it was wild and windswept. There was not the hilly grandeur of Skye or the ruggedness of some of the inner isles. Far out on the distant horizon, those landscapes shimmered as its backdrop. It lay like an emerald in the ocean, brilliant, frilled with white spume, home to myriad flowers and rare birds, oceanic shells, all the colours of the rainbow. It was crisscrossed by just a few roads strung out with old black houses and crofts, always a breeding ground for artists and craftsmen, naturalists and seafarers. Traders across the centuries had left their mark on Fetchy culture, its language and its poetry, and he was proud to be an adopted son. After all the wanderings of the past year, he was strangely content to return, if only the memories of his last visit would die down. How could he forget what he had said to Min McPhee? A shadow crossed his canvas, disturbing concentration for a second, and Ewan swung round in frustration only to see Jo in her thick coat and headscarf waving a flask, standing in his light with her arms folded. "Oh, it's you, Jo," he snapped. "Shouldn't you be at school? Have you forgotten it's mid-term? School's out and I've been down to the post office," she smiled, waving some mail in front of him. "Oh, is that all you've come for? It could wait. I want to get this finished." Ewan was putting the final touches to a seascape of sand, rock and waves. After Sandy's eye had roved over it, he was no longer satisfied with the finished effect. She shook her head. "I've heard some interesting news. I just thought you'd want to know," she said. "What do I want with gossip?" he sneered, continuing with his brushwork, standing on the planks under the upside-down boat, with a glass hole in the upturned hull to capture the northern light. "There's smoke coming out of the McPhee croft," she teased. "You came all the way down here to tell me Niall McPhee is in residence," he laughed. "That's where you're wrong. Peggy the postie had it on good authority from Sandy the Polis, who heard from Effie in the co-op store who saw Alice Munn, who's Peggy Sinclair's neighbour, that Min McPhee is cooried up in the cottage with her kiddies for mid-term." "So?" Ewan paused, unimpressed. "Apparently she flew in without any warning and they had to air the house in a hurry while they were staying at the hotel," she added. "Is the Lennox chap with them?" Ewan carried on fiddling about. "Apparently not. He's away on business, abroad or in America. You can take your pick. Anyway, we must ask them up for tea," Jo replied. "Whatever for?" snapped Ewan, wishing she would leave him to his work. "Ewan, you were engaged to the girl. We were all at school together and the whole island knows about it. So don't be mean," she smiled, her grey eyes flashing with a twinkle of mischief. "It'll set the cat among the pigeons if we do. Everyone wants to know why she's back and living in a wee house." "Joanna McKinnon, you're getting as bad as the old Calyux. And here was me thinking, what did I do to deserve such a paragon of virtue? Now leave me to my work and find some dusting," he said as she picked up an oily rag and threw it at him. "Oh, don't take it all so seriously. I'm only trying to be polite," Jo smiled. "I'd like to see her children and catch up. I feel bad we never saw her when her mother died. It'll be very strange for her after a big house. She might like to see the Crannog again before it's closed up for the winter." "Please yourself," Ewan muttered, feeling a wave of anger surging through him, tightening his chest. Jo stood inspecting the state of the boathouse. It smelt of oils and dried spirits, with crumpled rags curled to a crisp. Through the sunlight of the open door, she could see a stack of canvases, shelves of tools, frames lining the walls, an easel, and Colleen, his biscuit-coloured cairn terrier, snoozing in the corner. This was the working, living, messy studio of an artist. A shaft of sunlight glistened on the whiskey bottle and she picked it up in disgust, shoving it in his face. I'm going to pour that stuff in the sea. If your teetotal father could see the state of you. Joe pointed at his baggy checked shirt. It's about time you changed that rag. Don't you dare touch that bottle. It's a fine peaty malt from Islay. What pleasure is left if an artist can't have his dram after a hard day's work? Don't you be such a fishwife. Nag, nag, nag. And just what's this officer's camp bed doing back in here? Have you been sleeping rough at night? People'll think I've chucked you out of my bed. She winked. Trust this proud, eagle-eyed wife to miss nothing. He knew her chunnering was meant well, but he did his best work in a cramped guddle. It suited him sometimes to carry on painting into the night, to sit by the shore with his pipe and watch stars across the stretch of sky he knew so well. Sometimes he was just too bushed to walk back over the rocks and Macher to the big house. Sometimes he was too unsteady on his feet to attempt the journey. Sleeping rough alongside a bottle of Ardbeg had always soothed his spirits. He liked to be close to the sea. You shouldn't doss down in this hut like some tramp. I'm told you get too drunk to make it back some nights. How are we to ever make a child? Joe argued. Have the old Cailliachs of Colfetrish nothing to do but clack their false teeth so you come running with their cracking? He winked. The sea's rough now, and it's too cold for nights under the stars. What if you had an accident? She snapped. Then it's no far for you all to be dumping me back into the sea. He laughed away her worried look. Enough of this morbid talk. Why did I have to marry such an irascible man? Irascible, reclusive, stubborny bodach. That's you, she laughed. You shame me dressed like a tramp, your hair down to your shoulders, and a beard like Moses. Minnie will think you're some dosser when she sees you. Honestly, have you seen yourself in the mirror lately? How long since those bespattered cords saw a scrubbing board and washing line? I want them off you and in the tub. Joe tugged at his breeches. Hush, woman, and let me get on, he said, knowing there were still so many ideas in his head, so many moments he wanted to imprint in his memory before they left the island and the weather closed in on him. Joe still did not understand how fiercely he was driven. How could she understand how he had been given life when so many good men had perished in the war? The past was never far from his thoughts, invading his dreams with bitter memories. The sea was a cruel but stalwart companion, and he wanted to record its moods and secrets, capture the elusive power of its hold over him. Here on Vetri, he felt closer to its essence. It was here that his passionate affair had begun. Joe was sensing defeat and sighed. I don't know why I'm bothering. You never take a blind bit of notice of what I say. I might as well be invisible. Perhaps Min McPhee will put a clean shirt on your back and a decent shave on your face. Ewan put down his brush carefully, looking up with his leathery face creased into a V-shaped frown, his eyes spearing her with anger. And why on God's earth should she be doing that, then? Haven't you been listening to a word? I'm going to ask her round for tea. Don't make me ashamed of you. You couldn't get enough of her once upon a time, she added. That was a long time ago. We were still bairns. I don't care what I'm wearing, I never have. Life's too short to be a fashion plate, he snapped back. Well, there's no fear of that then. I'll leave you to it. Joe was making tracks across the powdery sand back to the path. Aye, I've heard you. Don't go making any show for that jumped-up madam, he shouted, throwing his brush across the boathouse. His face was drained, his weather-beaten features cragged, hewn and gnarled. I'll be making myself scarce. I'll not be wanting to make a spectacle for her amusement, he muttered, spitting his pipe out wearily. Suddenly, the sky above darkened as black clouds banked up over the sea. Ewan shivered with the chill on the breeze, uneasy at the news. Surely not. In the name of God, after all these years, the wanderer was returning to haunt him once more. He was in no hurry to go back to the house. Colleen wanted a run along the beach. In the grey light, the Macher was dotted with 1,000 stars, the last of the summer flowers still blooming. clover, fetchlings, harebells and wild thyme, shimmering with raindrops. He swigged the last of the malt in his flask in a gulp of frustration. Who was it that said whiskey took the fire out of fever and the ache out of loving? The wind was beating his cheeks like whipcords. Her presence on the island was making him edgy. He could sense her on the wind. Min, his signpost and his muse, hewn like him from these hard rocks. She was the one love that had almost broken his heart. He ached to see her, but hurt pride would cage up this longing. He would never go to her again, to that sea Cailleach who cast a spell over him. He must steer clear of her wily magic. The thought of her would distract him, for with her name came back so many memories. Thinking about her was an indulgence he could ill afford when there were so many other visions in his head. "Go away," he shouted. "Don't bother me," he yelled, and Colleen stopped in his tracks and sank on the sand, dejected. "Not you, old bodach, not you." He picked up a stick and threw it. One man, his wife and their dog was the best life for him. As he stood watching the dog tearing across the beach in pursuit of his master's command, he heard the siren voice calling to the seals and saw again the girl in the faded frock, barefoot on the shore. Their lives had been so inextricably bound together by the sea and the tide. How could what was begun with such innocence cause so much heartache, unless there was some curse in the wind? Chapter 3. Colfetrish. At first light, Min woke with a start. Where was she? She could feel Anna's bony legs lying across her stomach, but her own feet were cold on the stone bottle. She swung herself gently out of the bed, feeling giddy with hunger and fear. What had she done bringing her children into this cold, damp place on a whim? Her feet were used to soft rugs and polished floors, not rough mats and overcoats thrown over the bed for warmth. And she had to see if Hugh was still breathing. She tiptoed into the tiny box room where he slept tussle-haired under the borrowed plump eiderdown from next door. Her children had survived the night, and the fire was still in. She had not lost the art of fire-making. In fact, it had been fun to clean off this salty dust, beat the rugs and air the rooms, buy in provisions, get the range fired up, and give them an evening wash in the old zinc bath, wrap them snugly in the warmed beds, and settle them down with a story. It was like pretending to play wee hussies when she was little in her den with Agnes. She sat down in the wooden chair in the half-light, alert to the rattle of the door in the wind, the draughts creeping through the loose window and all the noises of a house waking up for the day, looking up at the weathered rafters. Everything seemed so small and cluttered. How had the three of them managed to live in the one room? As the parings of light slid through the curtain, she fingered the armrests polished with the elbows of many generations. Time stood still in this ancient place. Its fusty scent was unlocking the floodgates of recognition. Mother sitting by the fire, knitting at speed. Uncle Niall peering from the mantelpiece. And she felt small again. The past was all around her, and there was no escape. Min was afraid. What am I doing? What am I trying to prove? She thought. The whole island knew she was back, curious as to why and anxious to let her know that the McKinnons were also here. She was told about Ewan's course at the Crannog, that Joanna had lost her baby abroad, and that he was exhibiting in the Scottish Academy and in Glasgow. The artist was up for the Guthrie Award. It felt as if at every door and stopping place Someone would accost her with their pennyworth of knowledge about the happy couple, while trying to prise out of her just why she had returned so late in the season. The Lennox family was a 9-day wonder, and if she kept them all out of sight, then curiosity would soon fade. The Islanders would never change, she smiled. Yet, knowing she could bump into Ewan at any moment, tinged every hour with danger. What would he look like? Would he acknowledge her? Did it matter if he ignored her? She could hardly breathe. All the old sadness and yearning, buried deep for so long, was rising to the surface. This was her first courageous act for years. She was so alone in her marriage, filling her days with meaningless activities. How could she ever forgive Harry for cheating her into marrying him and being weak? How could she forgive herself for being weak and taking the safe option? "I don't like you, Min McPhee," she whispered into the smouldering peat. "I don't like who you've become, trying to pretend you could ever be a lady. Here you'll always be an oat bannock, not a white pan loaf." She smiled at Mother's words, echoing in her head. Mother was right, after all. She mustn't ever take those humble origins out of her heart. But part of her was missing Pitlandry and her comfortable home. "Who are you talking to?" Anna crept behind her, rubbing her eyes. "Just to some old ghosties. Granny and myself," she answered, feeling a sadness wash over her that she had not been closer to her own mother. "What are we going to do today? Can we go down to the beach exploring?" said Anna. "What's for breakfast?" "One thing at a time. Porridge first. I'll show you how we make it over the fire. I've soaked the oats in the pan. Then we'll get washed from the kettle and the bowl and go and buy a postcard for Daddy if you like. From the stores," she added, seeing the look of delight on Anna's face. "When are we going home?" said Anna. "We'll see. Aren't you enjoying your stay?" Min sighed. "It's cold and wet and I want to see Dusty." Anna gathered all the bowls onto the table. "And there's no toys here. We can make up our own games and play sandcastles. I can find a pony for you to ride if you like. When I was little, we had to amuse ourselves." She couldn't resist the jibe. How lucky her children were, and how different her own circumstances had been. "Did you have a friend like Dusty?" Anna said. "No, but I had Agnes McKinnon, my best friend at school." She felt her voice trembling. "Does she live on the island now? Can we visit her?" Anna asked, and Min shook her head. "Not exactly, but I can show you her name and tell you all about her later, if you like," she offered, and Anna smiled, her dark eyes flashing. The day was planned and her daughter was content. Anna was not an inborn bairn. Her world lay 100 miles away from here. It wasn't fair to drag her children out of their home on this wild goose chase. What dream was she chasing here? What fantasy was she acting out and forcing them to live as she had lived? Did she really want to stay in the cottage, deprive them of their father, put them in the village school where they would have to master a foreign tongue? Was this her plan? Are you jealous of your own children for being loved and pampered and cherished? In this house of stone there was little praise and encouragement for you, no hugs and kisses. Only Ewan treated you like a princess and you let him go. After him, no one was enough. Not Ken or Harry, but they seemed to be right at the time. Are you punishing your children? The fear stabbed her. Anna and Hugh were already bemused by their mummy speaking another language and the change of surroundings. Hugh was still young enough to adapt, but Anna wanted her daddy. Only, he wasn't her real father. Was it possible that her real father was here, and there was unfinished business between them? Had fate drawn them back together to sort out this one last thing remaining between them? This time, she would not be gainsaid. This time she would tell Ewan the truth and shame the devil no matter what. Then once her duty was done, she would be free. Free from what? For once, The storms relented and the wind died down enough to walk upright. The sun shone out of an ink blue sky, and for hours they could pretend it was still high summer, and race along the white sands, collecting the fine shells thrown up from the Gulf Stream, purples, pinks, cowries, while searching for messages in bottles. Anna wrote her name on a slip of paper, and they launched their message out on the tide. Then, borrowing Peggy's go-chair, they pushed Hugh along the tracks towards Ballinotter village and the crossroads to the little cemetery where Agnes lay. They picked up the last of the autumn flowers, and Anna ran ahead to look at the weathered gravestones. She knew about death because her kitten had died and horses had to be put down, and Gil's sheepdog had grown old, but not about little girls who died before their time. "How did she die?" she asked. "Drowned in the sea in an accident," Min said, picking her words with care. "What's an accident?" her daughter asked. "Something that just happens all of a sudden," she replied. How could she explain all the reasons why Agnes drowned? And she did not. "Did it hurt her?" Anna asked. And Min tried to be honest. "I don't know. We were swimming when we shouldn't have been swimming, and the sea took her away and then brought her back. But she wouldn't wake up." "Did she fall asleep in the sea?" Anna looked at the faded gravestone and then skipped around it. "Does she know we're here?" "I don't know. But every time I come home I have to pay her a visit and tell her all my news just in case." Min swallowed back her tears. No matter how long she lived on this earth, she would never forget Agnes. "And now I've brought my little girl to see her." "I'm not a little girl, I'm a big girl," sneered Anna, running off. "Let's go down to the sea and play accidents." "No, you don't. You hold my hand near the water, young lady. One accident is enough in a lifetime," Min shouted, but the wheels of the pram rutted in the damp sand. "Come on, time to head home for tea, and we'll bake drop scones on the griddle." Anna was staring out at the sea, transfixed by the huge rolling waves surfing down on the pebbles. "Why does it make that noise? Is it an angry sea?" she asked. "It does it at this time of year because summer is over and winter is coming," Min laughed. "I suppose it could be angry. I've never thought of it like that." "I think it's crying because it's lost its daddy," Anna said matter-of-factly, skipping along loppety, happy to be close to the water. In that instant, in that joy, Min knew that her child was another daughter of the tide, a child born of love, not rape. She had to be Ewan's daughter, tall for her age and slender. There was something of Agnes in that skipping, and her heart skipped a beat. If only she could be sure. Slowly they trundled their way back to the warm fire, stopping to let Hugh toddle along and roly-poly in the sand like a puppy. It was good for them to be in the fresh sea air. When they returned, there was a battered car outside the Macher, and Peggy Sinclair was waving from her cottage door. "You've a visitor, Mrs. Lennox. I've told him you were away out with the bairns for a walk." Her neighbour was peering into the window, pointing. "I hope I did the right thing." "Thank you. You are very kind," Min said, closing the door. Perhaps Ewan had called on her at last. "Ewan?" She found herself calling around, knowing full well it could not be him. Peggy would have said it was him. "Ewan?" she sighed, shaking her head. "Sorry, old girl. Only your husband," said Harry, rocking himself in front of the fire. "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy!" Anna flung herself into his arms. Min let Hugh waddle his way into the open arms, but she was weary. He gathered them in with a smile. "Harry, I told you not to come," she whispered. "I'm not surprised. Living in this hovel," he whispered back. "What on earth possessed you to bring them here?" "I wanted them to see where I come from, where I belong," she snapped. You don't belong here. You never did. You couldn't wait to get rid of your accent. Are you kidding? He laughed. It's time to get back on that plane to Glasgow and stop all this foolishness. She shook her head. Not yet. I need time, and you know damn well why I left you, she whispered. All sorted, I promise you. I went to see the Prentice boy. I explained I thought I'd hit a deer, but realised it was more serious. I offered them compensation. They were very understanding. I said how upset you were that I might not have realised it was Donnie at the time. It's all sorted now. What's sorted? Asked Anna. We're all gone back to the Fetri Hotel for the night, and tomorrow we're back home to Dusty, Harry winked. Men could have hit him, looking so smug. I'm not ready to go back yet, she said, suddenly weary from all the walking. I want to stay here a little longer with Hugh. Anna can stay with you just for tonight. Oh, by the way, this was shoved under the door. Letter from Loverboy, he sneered, handing her a note. She opened it, bending into the fire for the light. Sorry to have missed you all. Would you like to come to tea on Friday at the Cranach? Yours, Joanna McKinnon. Min sat down, suddenly exhausted. The invitation was not a surprise. Joanna must be as curious as the rest of the island. She had sensed one of them would have to make contact. There was no refusing and no excuses. This appointment must be kept, and she threw it to Harry. See, just a social call. I'd like you to see the old house. Don't rush off. Let's make it a bit of a holiday for the children's sake. In this weather, come and have a proper meal at the hotel at least, he replied. But Anna was tugging at his arm. Mummy's going to make drop scones and I'm going to help her and you can too, Anna ordered. But not until she's changed young Hugh, I hope. He stinks to high heaven, Harry laughed. Then pump us up some more water from the well. Min pointed with a sigh. It was all beginning again. Her boat was leaving the jetty bound for who knew where. With children aboard as ballast, how could she not steer a clear course? Chapter 4. The Cranach. I want you shaved, dressed and smartened up by 3 o'clock, ordered Joe, plonking Ewan's breakfast on the table. He was in no mood for interruptions after a fitful night and carried on with his outline sketch, barely looking up to greet her. What's so special about 3 o'clock? He teased, knowing full well that she had invited Min and her kids. Are we expecting a royal visit? All I'm asking is a pair of trousers without paint on them. Trim your beard and be civilised. I'll do the rest, Joe replied, ferreting in a box to find some old photos. Look, I brought these from home to show us all at school. I thought our little girl might be interested. What's her name? How should I know? Anne or Nancy, something like that. Suit yourself. I don't know why we have to go through this charade. I don't want to see Minnie McPhee or our wee brats, he snapped, feeling mean, but Joe had no right to invite them without his say-so. She was stirring up trouble. Ewan, what's got into you? You've been like a tiger on the prowl all week. If I didn't know you better, I'd say you were scared to face her. It must be 6 or 7 years since you two last met. She'll want to see these pictures. Joe sat down and slid them across the table. There she is, sitting with Agnes on the front row, looking wild and woolly. The one with the galoshes 2 sizes too big. They say down in Colfetrish that she's very smartly dressed even to go to the shore, in a gabardine mac and silk headscarf. There's you standing on the back row scowling and me in front with pigtails, she smiled, hoping to soften his moodiness. He picked up the school lineup, faded and cracked with age. How could he forget that summer? The summer Agnes drowned and Min lived. They were all blinking into the sunlight, windswept and tousled, so full of life and energy. There was Robbie Colquhoun, who was killed in Africa, and Murdo Murchison, who was lost on HMS Hood, and Lachie Sinclair, who died in a Jap POW camp, and Agnes, who never made it to the next school term. So many gaps in the lineup now. He had forgotten how pretty his sister was, so dark like himself. There had been no photos of her in the manse. Mother hadn't been able to bear looking upon her face, but had brought her out only when there was company, in case people would talk. Why should he be remembering that? Except that today the lady of Pitlandry was paying them a state visit. "I'm away to my work," he said, rising from the table. "You can ring a bell, but I don't want any interruptions. I'll take the bike across to the far end. This is the last day of your holiday. I should have thought you'd want to be enjoying yourselves, not entertaining my old girlfriend," he quipped. "Your old fiancée, Ewan. You dumped me for her, as I recall, at the regatta dance," she grinned wickedly. "And I lived to regret it, my goy," he said, pecking her on the cheek. "I wouldn't swap you for 100 mins." "I'm glad to hear it. Who else would put up with your moods and the wanderings of a man who lives in his head, lost in a world no one else can share?" she said, her soft hazel eyes twinkling with mischief. "I'm going to enjoy playing the lady of the manor myself, serving tea in the drawing room, baking fresh scones and biscuits for the small fry, and showing Mistress Lennox around the very house where she once scrubbed the stairs. There'll be no airs and graces after that little exercise," she winked. "But I want you by my side to show just what she's missed all these years. 3 o'clock, sharp, and no excuses. I'm depending on you, so take a watch. I know how you lose all track of time. And keep out of the tulloch." "Yes, Sergeant." Ewan saluted and clicked his heels. "I'll be there." "Why won't you come with me, Harry?" said Min as she was changing Hugh into his one clean outfit. There was no washing machine here to keep her children pristine. Just a bucket for soiled nappies and water from the well. She was running out of clean clothes and longed for a soak in the giant bath at Pitlandry. "I want you to see the Cranach, and us to meet the McKinnons together. Don't run out on me now," she pleaded. But for once, Harry was not for turning. "I've no mind to see McKinnon again," he said. "I wonder why. I've told you he knows it was you he spoke to. It was years ago," she replied, surprised by how important it was for him to be by her side when she met Ewan again. "You can take the baby, Brodie, and I'll take Anna out of your hair. We'll hire some ponies and trek down the coast," he offered, and Anna was jumping up and down with excitement. Since Harry's unexpected arrival, the child had never let him out of her sight, hanging onto his arm so the two of them had not a minute alone together, until the children were asleep. Then it was awkward in such confined space. "Oh yes, Mummy, you promised I could ride," said Anna. "But I really wanted to take you with me to show you everything," she said, torn by her desire for Ewan to see his daughter, and perhaps wonder at this newfound resemblance to Agnes. It was all part of the plan she was carefully constructing in her mind, so that when they were alone, she could drop this bombshell and test his reaction. She would engineer being alone with him somehow. Harry was to be the decoy, who would tour around the gardens with Joanna and Anna while she spoke to Ewan. Perhaps it was a silly fantasy, and best forgotten as no one wanted to play ball. She was nervous about going back to the old house, where she had been both happy and sad. At least pushing Hugh in the go-chair would give some solid support to lean on. He would be the distraction with his sandy gold curls, but it would remind Joanna of what she had lost, and Min didn't want to hurt them by parading a baby in front of them. Perhaps Peggy would be persuaded to mind him for a couple of hours. She dressed with care in a heather tweed suit and warm cashmere jumper in a soft shade of blue and matching scarf. It would be cold and draughty in the Crannog. Her gabardine was splattered with salty mud and stains, but it would keep out the chill. Harry was taking the hired car, so she would have to walk, as she had done all those years ago. How strange it was coming back as a parent, feeling almost middle-aged and staid in her brogues with her hair whipping her face in the wind. After nearly a week on the island, she still felt a stranger, an off-comer, a visitor politely welcomed but kept at arm's length. They all knew her history, and the islanders were suspicious. Peggy told her the rumour was that the Lennoxes were coming to buy the Crannog, and Harry's sudden arrival only confirmed this theory. "Why should we buy the Crannog?" she said, amazed at such an idea. "To pull it down and make a hotel or live in it in the summer," Peggy said, fishing for facts. "So it's not true then?" Min shook her head and smiled. Islanders never changed, but she had changed. Once upon a time when she was scrubbing out the stone pantry floor and picking up Lady Rose's smalls, she might have dreamt of buying it to lord it over everyone just to prove that the McPhees were as good as anyone. But those days were long gone. Now she would be happy to put in proper sanitation in the old cottage, running water and electricity, smarten it up as a holiday home for the summer months. But it still belonged to Niall and Mima, and was only on loan. What was happening to her plan to stay here and put the children in school to test how she could live simply without Harry's money? It was fading fast in the harsh reality of life without running water and comforts. Harry was doing his best to be attentive and had not touched a drop since his arrival. He was sober, thoughtful, and the children were happy to see him. He was keeping his end of the bargain, but what about her? All she could think of was seeing Ewan again, holding his hand, feeling the grip of his fingers, looking into those dark eyes and wondering if he still found her attractive. It was wrong. It was ignoble. It was not fair on his wife. But she felt the pull of him even now, and her steps quickened to the gates of the house, so carefully avoided until this moment. She was struck by the stone grandeur of the old keep, a fortress jutting out on stilts from the little loch by its side. It had been won on the turn of some roulette wheel in the 18th century, but its origins were steeped in the violent history of the island. There were thick castle walls at the heart of it, but the outside was softened by rebuilding in the Georgian style. Elegant sash windows that were a devil to clean from the inside, and 4 flights of stairs, each step of which she had known from their splinters and creaks. It would make a fine hotel, suitable for sailing and fishing and shooting, but dependent on ferries and air and decent weather. She thought of how Pitlandry nestled into the woodland, grew out of the landscape. But this house was the tallest on the island, and could be seen for miles, standing sentinel like a barracks. She would not want to live here. She walked up the gravel path slowly, taking in the loch and the overgrown garden. The paintwork was flaking on the windows, and the door was in need of some good oil. Pulling the ring bell, her heart thudding with anticipation, she stood on the steps, trying to look composed. It was Joanna who came to the door, smiling, older, paler, thinner, but still the factor's daughter, the upright head girl of their school days. "Do come in." She paused, looking behind her visitor. "You've not brought your children?" "Harry came earlier than we thought," she lied. "He wanted to take them both out. Hugh is quite a handful at the moment and needs a sleep." She lied again, as she was escorted through the familiar front hall to the main staircase, where there were blank spaces and no portraits. It had seen better days, she thought, thinking of how once they were bowls of flowers and sparkling paintwork. As if reading her thoughts, Joanna smiled. It must look very different. It was the officers' billet, and after the war lay empty. The Art Foundation rented it for students, and as you can see, they've bashed it around a bit. Min glanced around, still nervous. There was a charm about its shabbiness. The smell of cigarette smoke, bashed leather chairs, the dull panelling on the walls, and the remains of artwork lying around. It had a lived-in, relaxed look, as if all the frosty corners of the Strother family were knocked away. She followed Joanna as she climbed up to the drawing room on the first floor, where Ewan would be waiting, no doubt. "Are you staying long?" asked Joanna as she opened the door. "I'm not sure," she smiled back, surveying the room at a glance. "Harry will have to go back to his business, of course, and I can't keep Anna out of school too long." Min paused. "I had forgotten how wonderful the view is from here." She rushed across the empty room to peer out the window. She fingered the same old brocade curtains lined with hand-woven blankets to keep out the draughts. How she had struggled with those shutters when she was small. She turned, expecting Ewan to walk through the door, but no one came, and Joanna sat down, poking the fire. "I expect you're wondering where Ewan is." She looked up at her guest. "These artists sometimes don't know what day of the week it is, never mind the time. Ewan is hopeless. He won't be long, and then I'll bring some tea." She smiled, and the corners of her mouth twitched. Min could sense the tension, the embarrassment, and the gaps in their polite conversation. She hardly knew Joe McKinnon. They'd never mixed in the same circles when they were young. And there was that night before the war. She was older and cleverer. She went to college and was a teacher. The only connection they had was Ewan, and he was late. Joanna was cross and trying not to show it. It was up to her to put his wife at ease. "This must be a wonderful place for artists to study," she offered. "Are you staying through the winter?" "Just until New Year. Then we hope to go abroad again to Paris. There's so much Ewan needs to learn. His training has been very bitty, what with the war and everything. I'm just holding the fort in the school until Miss Ferguson recovers from her operation. You recall Betty Ferguson in the school? She went away to Glasgow to train as a teacher at Jordan Hill." Min nodded politely, recalling a little shrimp of a girl in glasses with a crooked leg who was always into her books. "How's Ewan?" she braved. "I hear he's doing well with his art." "Ugh, you know Ewan," Joanna sighed. "He lives his life like a clenched fist, in and out like the tide, always full of ideas. He gets cranky when he's not working. I expect that's where he is now, up to his boots in mud, stuck on a rock sketching." Her laughter was brittle and false. "I was sorry to hear about your miscarriage," Min offered, feeling the tension mounting in both of them. "It wasn't a miscarriage," she whispered. "It was a stillbirth, just one of those things. We were in Italy, Andrew's buried there. They say time's a great healer, but..." Joanna was trying to swallow back her emotion. "Oh, where is that damn man? I'm sorry if I upset you by asking. Perhaps I'd better go. Perhaps another time is better. I don't want to intrude. It was very kind of you to invite me, considering..." Min rose to leave, but Joanna barred her way. "Considering what, Min?" "Considering that it's Ewan you want to see, not me. It's the two of you who are friends. We were hardly to be bosom friends, were we? How I hated you over the years for letting him down like that, hurting his feelings. You bewitched him on that night of the regatta, and then you dropped him for the Lennox heir," she snapped. Min stepped back in shock. It wasn't exactly like that. Didn't Ewan tell you? She paused, seeing the look of confusion on Joanna's face. He had not said a word about Harry's deceit. Joanna continued. He came to me limp and broken in Glasgow, and I was there to comfort him. Don't think that I don't know I was second best. I felt your presence in his canvases, in his dreams. Following an artist isn't easy. They've no interest in mundane chores. It's living out of a suitcase, always on to the next idea, the next scene. Perhaps if we'd stayed here, Andrew would have lived. A child might have changed him. Jo was staring out of the window, down the empty path. You have everything and you still come back for more. No wonder Ewan is staying away from the power of you. I'm sorry, Joanna cried. I've been so rude. I don't know what came over me. She pulled a handkerchief to cover her tears. I can't let you leave after such a tirade. Since the baby, I've not been myself. She sat back on the sofa, exhausted by her outburst. Let me make you a cup of tea. I know the kitchen like the back of my hand, said Min. There's not a nook or cranny of this place I've not swept, dusted or polished. One of the reasons I came back on this whim was, like you, I've not been myself since I had Hugh. There have been problems at home. I needed to get away. Life isn't smooth waters even when there's a cushion of a few bob in the bank. Believe me. I had no idea you would be here. It's not true, you know. Ewan loves you. He told me as much. You're a good wife to him. I would have been a selfish, demanding Cailleach. She sped downstairs, shaken by Jo's outburst. The tea was laid out in the kitchen, easy to find, with its familiar cupboards and floors and scents. She carried the tea with trembling hands in a tray, as she had done for Lady Rose. I'm so sorry, Min. I never meant to say any of this, Joanna apologised. When did Ewan tell you about me? Tears are better out than in, my doctor tells me. Ewan phoned me after Mother died to apologise for not attending the funeral. We spoke on the phone and that is all. She lied with conviction. I'm sad, of course, that I won't get a chance to see him. There was one little matter I did want to clear up, but it can wait. She smiled, sipping the tea. It was like old times bringing the tray up here, but I'm sad to see the china's seen better days. They made polite chatter, glanced at the old photos carefully displayed, worked their way up the 3-tiered stand of scones, tea bread and fancies until Min glanced at her wristwatch and made to leave. Thank you for being honest, Joanna. Not everything you think is true. I have my side of the story, but it's better to let the old dog slumber. Ewan and I shame the blame for Agnes's death, and we'll have to live with that for the rest of our lives, she tried to explain. The rest of their history was not for sharing. Good luck and safe travels. She reached out for Joanna's hand. It was kind of you to ask me in. No one else on this island has bothered, she said. They're afraid that you're too grand for us now, Joanna said. You haven't changed, you know. Not deep down. And I'm sad that Ewan couldn't be bothered to give you the time of day. It is his loss, she added. Min sobbed all the way back to Kilfetrish. Great gulps of tears. How could he be so cruel? There was unfinished business between them. How could he still stir her heart like this? Why had he humiliated her in front of his wife? Why was he afraid to see her face? She stopped suddenly in her tracks. Only the heart sees clearly, she thought. In another time and place, Jo and I could have been friends, not rivals. There was only one reason why Ewan was avoiding her now, and Jo knew it too. The power between them was still there. How could you let me down like that? Jo screamed at her husband when he arrived 10 minutes after Min walked back down the drive. What's your excuse this time? None. I told you I'd no mind to meet that woman again, he snapped. It was all your idea, so I left you to it. And what a fool I made of myself. Breaking down in front of her, blaming her for ruining your career, losing our baby, spoiling this island, she sniffed. You did what? You hardly know the woman. Damn and blast you. I just want some peace and quiet to get on with my work, and you stir up a hornet's nest. What's got into you? Ewan was furious, guilty, ashamed and embarrassed all at the same time. He had spent the afternoon lurking in the studio watching the clock until he was sure the Lennox woman would have left for Kilfetrish. He was not proud of his action, but it was for the best all round. You think I don't know what a spellman McPhee holds over you? I wanted to show her who was boss here. I wanted you there by my side to prove that you're mine now. But without moving a finger, after 6 years, she has you running scared. So scared you can't even put on an act and give me some support. Jo was sobbing. How do you think that makes me feel? It's not over between you and her, and it never will be until you do something about it. She's a part of you I can never share, and you cut me out of your feelings. I'm sorry, Jo. Come here, I didn't think. If only you'd said what you were feeling. Ewan gathered her into his arms. It's not what you think. When I see Min, I see Agnes and the war and other things I've never told you about. She's part of all that, and I want to shove it all in the past, not dig it up again. But I see I've been a coward, and I'm sorry. Sorry's not enough, Ewan. Not this time. Now's your chance to sort it out in your head, and give us all a chance. Let it all go and face her, for my sake, for our sake, for our future's sake. Jo cried into his chest. It's not like that, he said, puzzled. Oh, but it is, Ewan. It's her or me. I can't share you with her anymore, Jo sighed. But I've not seen her for years. How could she threaten us? He asked. They were treading in dangerous waters now. She's in your head and your heart. In everything you create, I see her influence. I can't compete with your dreams unless I know what they are. You have to choose. Take her with you and get off the island, or set me free to find my own life, or let her go and bring all of yourself back to me. He had never seen Jo like this before. Her eyes were steeled, icy with fury and pain. How had it come to this when he had done nothing but stay away out of courtesy? How had he got it so wrong? The very act of avoiding a confrontation with Min was the one thing that confirmed to Jo that he still preferred the past to the present, and it wasn't true. He loved Joanna, and he had loved Min, but they were different loves. How could she ask him to destroy his muse? It was like asking him to stop painting and drawing and destroy his imagination. Tell me what to do, Jo, he asked. I would never hurt you. Jo shook her head and stared up at him. If I have to tell you that, then what hope is there for us? She turned and left, banging the door. Ewan stared out of the window, watching the dark clouds banking up over the sea. Storms were gathering for a flood tide. It was too late to do anything about it now. Chapter 5. Kilfetrish. The storm raged for 2 days and nights. Min had forgotten just how the Atlantic Ocean could rattle the island to its very foundations, so that few trees could stand the gales and the houses grew with their backs to the west like tombstones. No one could stand against its power, or sail over water or fly in the air, and the planes were grounded and Harry felt trapped and restless, eager to take them back south. He insisted that they hole up in the Fetri Hotel together, fearful the roof of the cottage might collapse. It's been there for 100 years or more. Houses are built to stand up to the weather here, Min argued. But for the sake of the children, she left the cottage and enjoyed her first decent bath for days. They played tiddlywinks and Ludo and paper games. Anna was full of pent-up energy and wanted to race around the shore, but it was too windy for her to be let out. On the third day, the storm eased and Harry went racing to book them tickets for Glasgow, but the flights were still cancelled, and he could hardly contain his fury. Of the islands in all the world, why did we have to land up here? This is the most god-awful, dreary place on earth. No wonder you wanted shut of it, he snapped. How could she tell them that she had enjoyed the storm, the windows battered by rain, the howling gale in the chimney? It was part of her childhood, complete with smoking chimney and soot and stew over the fire. Together they were safe, a family once more, and she could shove all thoughts of Ewan's rejection out of her heart for a few hours. If he could not be bothered to give her a minute of his time, then she could not be bothered to write to him about Anna. Two could play at that game. But Joanna's words stung her for being half-true. Once she knew Ewan was on Fetri, she had wanted to see him for old time's sake. Auld Lang Syne. She found herself humming the tune. Should old acquaintance be forgot, and never brought to mind. She sang to herself and then stopped. Go on, Mummy, sing us another song, pestered Anna as they amused themselves around the piano. She sang the Skyboat song, We'll Mak the Keel Row, and Rode to the Isles. Hugh clapped his chubby hands and tried to join in, and Harry stood back silent. It's time you took up those lessons in Edinburgh, Brodie Lennox. I shall organise some soirees for my clients, and you can sing for your supper, he laughed. Don't be silly. Who'd want to hear me caterwauling? She said, flushing at the thought. I've paid good money to hear worse, he laughed. Thanks very much, but I'll keep my singing to the bath from now on, she replied. She was just about to start packing when Mrs. Stewart said there was a call coming for Mistress Lennox. Min hoped it wasn't bad news from Pitlandry. Hello, she said, for the line was weak. Is that you, Min? It's Ewan. I gather you want to speak to me about a matter. The line went quiet. How dare he pick up the phone as if they were old chums, and he had not avoided her yesterday. She wanted to be cool and cold and collected. I could have said my piece yesterday, and 2 years ago for that matter, if you had deigned to put your face round the door, she answered, her voice shaking. I know. Sorry, I know, but we can meet up now, said Ewan. What, in this weather? I'm not traipsing back to the Cranach on a wild goose chase again, for you to be away at your scribblings and getting an earful from your wife, she answered. You've every right to be angry. I gather Jo went over the top a bit. She's very upset, he said, sounding contrite and anxious at the same time. We're going home tomorrow if the plane can land, she said. I wouldn't bank on it, he said. I can meet you at your cottage or the hotel. No, I don't want an audience of eavesdroppers. On the beach for a walk for Auld Lang Syne, she replied. At the beach of the Singing Winds, he offered. No, not there, she snapped back. She would never go back to their old trysting place. Ballinotter will do. Halfway between your place and mine will be fine. And don't keep me waiting, it's cold. She put the phone down sharp. Who's that? Harry sidled up to her, putting his arms around her waist. It was Ewan. He wants to meet me. What does he want? Harry's voice hardened. How should I know? She snapped back. Are you going to go? Of course. There's things he should know, she added. Not all that business about Anna, is it? Leave it be, Brodie. You said yourself you weren't sure. Don't bring up all that stuff again just when we were getting along fine. Harry's eyes were glinting with anger. Harry, nothing's fine until this is all sorted. All out in the open. It doesn't go away for being swept under the carpet. I have to see him one more time, just to be sure, she said, hoping he would understand. To be sure you want to come back to Pitlandry or stay on this god-forsaken island mooning over Loverboy? The gloves were off now. Do you mind if we go somewhere less public to have a row? Pas devant les enfants? She stared at him. I need a drink. I'll see you later. Harry turned his back on her. She caught his arm. Come on, sit down. Calm down. I'm only going for a walk with him, not jumping between the sheets. He has a right to know about Anna one way or the other, she pleaded. Then it is finished. It'll never be finished between you two. Don't think I don't know why you've hung on here. I'd have given you 3 days on Fittray if McKinnon wasn't here. Don't think I don't know that I was always second best, a meal ticket, and also ran. No wonder a drink, he whispered, watching Anna, turning to see what they were arguing about. If she is his Ben, he'll want to be seeing her and interfering, and I'll never be rid of him. He will be the spectre at the feast, the ghost who hovers over a bed. It's been good all has been together these past days. Don't spoil it all just as we're going home. Let him go. Stand him up. You had years to tell him and you didn't, so why now? Because my silence has gone on long enough. You'll have to trust me. I know what I'm doing, she whispered back, mouthing the words. Do you? Do you really know what you're doing? Opening all this up again? I don't trust him, Harry replied under his breath. It takes one to know one. You took your chance and betrayed my trust, but I'm not like you. I keep my word. If there was any other way, I'd take it. But it has to be face to face. I have to know, she cried. Know what? He shouted. I'll know when it happens, she whispered. I have to go. Where are you going, Mummy? Why are you cross? Anna climbed on Harry's knee. We're not cross, darling. Mummy has gone out for a walk. Harry tried to smile. Can we go too? Said Anna. No, dear, I have to meet someone, Min replied. She was not going to lie to her child. I want to come with you. It's dry outside now, Anna argued. I know, and Daddy will take you both out when Hugh wakes up. Be a good girl. Min rose to find her coat and hat. Where are you going? Anna whined. To Ballinwater, Min said, wishing her daughter would shut up. To see Agnes' accident, shouted Anna. I'm coming with you. No, I don't want you to come this time. This is grown-ups talking. Stay with Daddy. He'll buy you some sweeties from the store if we have any coupons left. Min smiled, but Anna was scowling. That familiar V furrow over her brow with a turned-down mouth that made Min laugh. If the wind catches that sourpuss face, you'll be stuck with it forever, young lady. I hate you, shouted Anna from the door. And I don't like you when you sulk, snapped Min, turning herself to face the westerly. It had come at last. This final summons. No more shilly-shallying, coxing and boxing around the island. This time, there was no escaping the moment, and her heart leapt with excitement. When I see him, I shall know, she sang, and marched herself down to the grey wet road. Ballinwater Point. It was time to go and sort this business out once and for all. Ewan was in no mind to be lingering on a deserted beach as he strode down the coastal path. But he was dressed with care in his khaki corduroys and Harris tweed jacket, feeling the security of his second-best pipe in his pocket. And he had trimmed his beard. So what if the mountain was coming to Mohammed at long last? He was doing it for Joanna and no one else, and for the hurt he had caused her yesterday. If he had not been so thoughtless, this visit would have been unnecessary. It was cold and windy, and the sea was restless, swollen. There were far better things to be doing on this dull afternoon. Yet his steps quickened at the thought of meeting his old lover, face to face again. He did not want to explain why he had missed her last time, through no fault of his own. He could make 100 excuses why he had flunked coming in for tea at the Crannock, and she would no doubt see through them all. What a square dance they had led each other over the years, going round and round in circles, forwards, backwards, swing your partner, change your partner, round you go. Ewan smiled to himself. Now they would take up their positions as polite strangers, bow one to the other, circle around and then walk off in opposite directions forever. So what was he worried about? If only it were that simple, he chunnered to himself. If truth were told, since he had heard Min was on the island, part of him ached to catch a glimpse of her again. But the sensible bit of him had scuttled into the safety of his studio to keep out of her way. How could she be on Fittray without them meeting? Min was Fittray, part of the mystery and magnetic force that bound him to this island, part of the gravitational pull of this sea and this tide force. Don't be so whimsical, he argued to himself. Fetri was a lump of rock set in a rough sea, and the woman had not lived here for years. They were both married to others, and there was nothing binding them but sad memories and a brief fling. They were grown up now with responsibilities for others. How could he even think such things? And yet, when he saw the outline of the lone figure walking towards him in the distance, his heart leapt with recognition and excitement. His steps were quickening with anticipation, as if some old memory of running towards her was still informing his feet. It was an effort of will to slow down and saunter, as if he didn't care that she was drawing even closer, and he would see the face of 1,000 dreams, those sea-blue sapphire eyes, the sunshine hair, the body that would never disappoint him. His hands were shaking and he shoved them in his pocket to find his pipe and pouch. A man needed support at a time like this. The old spark, that damned eternal spark, was still lurking to ignite the unwary, and he must shield himself from weakness with the thought of Joe waiting anxiously for his return, trusting in his decency and honour. How he wanted to feel indifferent towards the Lennox woman, immune to her physical presence, bored by her intellectual inferiority and ignorance of his artistic world, angry at her tainted wealth, but most of all, unmoved by the sight of Min McPhee standing now before him. He was washed away on the tidal wave of her scent, the salt-tangled freshness of her features. She had not aged, but seemed younger, more vulnerable, breathless, her eyes averted for a second, and then flashed out a shy smile as she held out a hand to him like a polite stranger. This gesture stung him more than he could say. He was speechless and nodded like some dumbfounded schoolboy on his first date. The dance had begun. She looked up at him, unprepared for the impact of the surf roller wave hitting her, making her step back, reeling from the shock of seeing the dark man of her dreams once more. Wild-haired, standing with the same half-smile and wide grin. Taller, broader, with the same confident stance. His legs apart as if grounded, anchored into the sand. His beard made him seem even more distinguished. Time rewound its tape, and it was as it always was. Nothing was changed. Oh, Ewan, she thought. I've dreamt of this coming together so many times, imagined me telling you the full truth of our story, written 100 letters of explanation. How many times has your name been on the tip of my tongue? Why does courage fail when I think of breaking the long silence between us? It seemed like a full 5 minutes before either of them could speak. But it was only seconds when Ewan laughed. So, we meet again, Min McPhee. I was hoping to catch you singing to the seals, but what made you want to come back here to this beach to talk after all that happened? He stepped back, mirroring the distance she had made between them. I don't know. It felt right to meet out in the open where it all began. She hesitated, knowing Ballinotter Point was windswept and the rollers were heaving and crashing down on the shingle. How are you, Ewan? She whispered. I'm fine, and you didn't bring me all this way to talk about my health. And for your information, I did try to contact you yon time after your mother's funeral. My watch stopped. I mistook the time until it was too late. I meant to come, but you and I have ebbed and flowed like the tide, waxed and waned like the moon, but never in unison, never together in the same place at the same time long enough to straighten things out or to connect, he said, pointing in the air with his pipe. We managed it once or twice, or does my memory fail me? On a certain beach under the stars, she smiled. Had he forgotten their old trysting place? Now we stand like strangers landed up on the shore, listening into the wind. It could all have been so different, she said, piercing him with her fiercest gaze, willing him to make it easy for her. He said nothing as he turned his face from her. Don't tempt me, Min, thought Ewan. Don't dazzle me with your glamour and beauty. Don't do this, reminding us of what might have been if only we were free to love. Perhaps it's the arrogance of a first love that it thinks it can outlive all other loves, that it can be picked up any time and any place. You and I are different people, older now, with separate lives and histories. Ewan sensed he must be hard for both of them. Step back from those piercing eyes and the scent of her. Step back from the brink. So, what was there of such importance that you needed to tell me before you left the island? What is there to speak of now after all this time, Ogoy? But the weather and our health? He snapped. Flippancy was always a good defence. There was a deafening silence for a second as she brushed back a strand of golden hair from her face and drew a gulp of air as if summoning courage to make herself plain. There's something I should have told you long ago and didn't. Even now, Ewan, I'm after wondering if I should, she said, looking into his face, trying to read his mind. He had forgotten how intense Min could be, how determined to succeed, how ruthless she was in stunning his willpower, how dangerous it was to be alone with her. Spit it out then, it's too cold to be standing, he said, looking at his watch, trying to unnerve her with his careful indifference. After you left Fetri, there was a baby, she began, but he snapped her off in full flight. The wee love child that Harry passed off as his brother's bairn. Ewan felt his lips curl into a sneer. He told you a pack of lies, as well you know. What I didn't tell you was that... Min stopped short, distracted by a moving figure, a small shape jumping across on the rocks, jutting out towards the needles of Ballinotter Point. What the devil? Look, Ewan, there's a child playing on the end of those rocks. And it's Anna, she screamed, running as if her life depended on it. Come down from there this minute. What's she doing up there? Harry is supposed to be looking after them. Anna, you naughty, disobedient Cailleach, come down off there this minute, and I'll be giving you such a scalping. She screamed like a fishwife, but Ewan grabbed her arm. Wheesht, don't startle her. She must have followed you. Why? He asked, working out the best way to approach the child, as she was stranded on the edge with the racing tide flooding and swirling into the bay. In a few minutes, she would be sitting on an island of slippery rock, at the mercy of the swell as it broke on the needles. I took her to see Agnes's grave. I told her the story and she wanted to play accidents. The minx. She wanted to come today, but I turned her back, and she's followed me. Look at her now, with no sense of danger, waving as if this is some picnic. Oh, Ewan, I'm not dressed for the rocks, but if I have to scramble up barefoot, we have to get her down. Oh, dear God. Not again. Not Agnes. Not our daughter. We have to save her. She's our daughter. Ewan was racing ahead, not listening to Min's pleas to the Almighty to save the child. He had long ago stopped putting faith in that higher authority. All he could see was a little girl, not yet frightened, about to be trapped by the sea. Once she was stranded, she would freeze with fear and cold. They had to reach her first before the tidal waves lashed over her. The sea witches of Ballinotter Point were about their mischief again. Min was gasping for breath, running against the force, loosening her coat, anything that might hamper the task ahead. Where the hell was Harry? Dozing in the bar while Hugh slept? She could kill him for being so careless. Now was no time for blame. Ewan was already yards ahead of her, tearing off his jacket, making for the gully and protecting himself against the force. Why was there no one around when you needed them? Fishermen, coast guard, not a single passer-by. There was no one to stop this tragedy happening all over again. The sea wanted her child. You can't have her, she screamed into the wind. We'll defy you. Take me if you need a sacrifice, but this child is the future of this island, fruit of these very rocks, a daughter of the tide, an ally, not an enemy, so be gentle with her. Suddenly she was back on this beach, so many eons ago, swimming with Agnes, losing her grip, losing sight of her friend. Her limbs heavy and weary, and the fear pumping all the stuffing out of her body. And she tasted the salt and the ling and the fear, for the first time, remembering it all. Climb back, Anna. Mummy's coming. Go back where you came from, it's not too late. We'll soon reach you and the sea hags won't have you. If you climb higher up, the sea cailleach can't reach you. The green hag who haunts this tide, this hungry tide will go away empty-handed. Mummy's coming. The wind was carrying her voice away from the rocks and out of earshot. It was hopeless to outshout the sea. She dared not look, but look she must, and face her fear if they were to save their child. This was all her doing, the lingering obsession that had brought them both here. If only she could have walked away from the temptation to see Ewan again. But no. The pull of curiosity was too strong. She wanted to see if the passion was still there, the look of longing in his eyes. She wanted to tempt him again, and now she was paying the price of her silly fantasy. You can't turn back the clock, she cried. We are not as we were, nor even can be, you fool, she thought. She sank into the wet sand on her knees. Save my child and I'll never trouble this island again. Take me in her place if you must, but don't harm Anna for the sins of her silly mother. As God is my witness, I'll do anything, but save my child, Ewan, she prayed, with tears streaming down her face. Then she began to climb with smooth hands not used to gripping wet rock, slime and lichen, hands grown weak. Not the calloused hands of her youth when she could skim over these rocks like a goat, but manicured, useless fingers that felt out the ledges slowly. She would clamber up behind the child and guide her back to safety, coax Anna back into the safety of her arms, away from the treacherous gullies and crevices that were as deep as hidden wells. At least her shoes were tough, with low heels, and gave some purchase. Together they would make a team and pull the child to safety. Then she caught a glimpse of Ewan waving, shaking his head as she tried to clamber up the rock and signalling. Go for help. Summon the lifeboat. Find a lifebuoy or a fishing line, anything, he signalled. He was far away from her now like a dot scrambling up towards the lump of rock where Anna was cowering down, aware at last that she was in danger. She could read his thoughts, hear his commands. He would save Anna as he had saved her all those years ago. Ewan knew what he was doing. He would rescue the child while she must run and do his bidding. For a second, she lost concentration and shifted her balance, losing her grip, so she began to slip, grasping at the rough slime, plunging backwards onto the sand. Winded and shocked by the fall, she knew she was stranded. Her ankle was suddenly numb. It wasn't working. Trying to stand only made it worse. Just when she was needed most, she busted her ankle and would have to hobble up the shingle to the path, crawl if needs be. But she knew where there was the one telephone on the counter of Ballinottar post office. If she had to crawl on hands and knees, she would make that village and raise the alarm. Tying her scarf tightly round her ankle, she forced herself to stand and hobbled, wincing with pain and frustration. Where was the island girl who once could race barefoot over rocks? Where was Min McPhee in this feeble, useless body? And where the hell was Harry? Then she saw the black saloon heading down the bumpy track and knew the cavalry was arriving in the nick of time. Now everything would be all right. She sat down on a boulder, waving furiously. Harry jumped out of the car. "Is she with you? I've been searching with Sandy here. The blighter darted off while my back was turned." "Where's Hugh?" she cried, trying to hobble forward. "He's fine, in the bar, fast asleep. Where's the young madam? Scaring me half to death." Harry saw the look on Min's face as she pointed to the rocks. "What's happened? Oh my God, she's stuck on the rock and the tide's nearly covering it. Ewan's swimming up to hold her. We've got to do something and quick, or we'll lose them both to the tide," she screamed. "And it's all my fault." Harry was running and Sandy was running, and she was stuck with only an old umbrella to lean on as she jumped into the car. She would drive for help, drag out every man she could find and summon the villagers before it was too late. Ewan was climbing, gripping onto the tiny crevices, shinning up edge by edge to where the girl sat shivering. "Lie flat," he ordered her. "Cling onto the rock and it will hold you," he added, trying to coax her to move, but she was terrified. All he was thinking about was getting up there before the tidal waves washed over her, sweeping them both out to sea. Min would be running for help, gathering nets and lines and men in boats who would risk themselves on the swell for a child. He looked up at her face, the dark, frightened eyes and the frown. She didn't look like Harry or Min with that sodden black hair. Anna was little more than a baby with long legs, a fearless madam to get herself out into such danger. She began to whimper and shiver, eyeing him with a fierce, curious gaze. "Stay down flat. I won't be long. Mummy's gone for help," he panted, for the exertion was tiring his limbs. It was years since he had tried himself against the rocks with the SBS. "You're unfit, man, gone flabby with all that sitting," he thought. But his will of steel would give strength to his muscles. He knew this coastline only too well, and this time the sea mustn't take this child, as it had taken Agnes. He looked up, and for a flash of a second, he thought he saw his sister lying flattened on the rock, her face looking down at him. For a second, it unnerved his concentration to be seeing a ghost. Was this all a bad dream? Was he swimming out again after his sister who had died on these very rocks? The wind biting his fingers, whipping his face was no apparition. This was real, and he was losing his grip with such fantasies. But if he could save Anna, it would be one back from the dead. A life saved. A fresh start. A debt repaid. No more hankerings after the past and possession of Min. He would be free of the guilt forever. This was his plea bargaining to himself as he clambered the last few feet. One more lift and he would have her within his grasp. There was barely enough room for the two of them, but once he grabbed her, he was not going to let Anna go. He edged himself slowly onto the tiny island and smiled at her. "I'm Ewan, a friend of your mummy. Come to get you back home, but first you must do everything I say," he smiled, holding her into his body, rubbing her arms to keep her warm. "Why is the sea hurting us?" She looked up at him in all seriousness. "The sea is the sea, Anna. It does what it always does. It takes orders from the wind and the moon," he replied, looking up with relief to see a line of men edging towards them slowly, dodging the crashing spray as best they could. "Look who's coming. There's Sandy and Archie Kinnock," he pointed. He could see Harry Lennox following behind, carrying what looked like a net. There was a crowd gathering on the beach. Word would have got back to Joanna on the island bushwires, and she would be worrying. How could he ever think of betraying her trust? How could he ever snatch at his own happiness without ruining hers? Yes, there was still the Min of his dreams, but she was changed by motherhood and other experiences he would never want to share. We were never meant to be together, he thought, as he held her daughter tight. This obsession to possess her again would be an all-consuming drive if he gave into it. He knew that from his art. It was enough to have one demanding mistress in his life, not two. And where would that leave Joanna? Pursuing his old love meant hurting good people and innocent children. How could he ever have dreamt of betraying his wife? All that mattered now was saving this child and getting off this damned uncomfortable rock and back to his studio. This was all his doing. His timing was always out of kilter when it came to Min McPhee. Now timing was of the utmost, if they were to get off the rocks safely. "What took you so long?" he shouted to Sandy. "Can we fix up a line? I can't risk her in the sea." "I can swim." Anna was coming to life as she saw Harry Lennox hovering anxiously. "Daddy!" "Not in this tide you can't, young lady. Is there another rope and a buoy?" "Tie the rope round the buoy and throw it," Ewan ordered, thinking on his feet. If he could loop it through the other rope and make a swing, he could carry the weight of this little girl, sitting on the buoy while she was thrown across the flooded gully to safety. "Is there no other way?" shouted Harry. "She'll need coaxing. We've brought some nets. There's no time to scramble the nets. Just let's try it before the waves push me forward." "What about you, Ewan? They've called out the lifeboat, but with this sea," Sandy shouted. "Just get on with it now," he screeched as he secured the boy to the rope. He turned to Anna. "Now, we're going to play a special game of swing the boats. I want you to sit in the buoy and hold on tight," he smiled, edging her towards the lifebuoy. "Then I'll lift you up and slide you across the little sea to your daddy, very slowly. Don't look down. Look across to your daddy and cling on tight. Promise me." He was mouthing the words above the roar of the water crashing on the rock. "Are you coming too?" she asked. "When you're safely across, I'll come across on the rope," he replied, hoping there would be enough time to jump on the rope and abseil his way back down. "Let's do it now." He wrapped the rope round his body. Never had he needed to be grounded into these rocks as he did now. It was going to take strength, luck, and cunning to outwit the treacherous seas. Slowly, with her eyes clenched shut, Anna clung astride the lifebuoy at an angle as they winched it across the raging water, swinging. Ewan was straining every muscle to hold her against the wind and the slippery surface, while arms were flung out waiting to grab the child as she slid ever closer to the next slab of rock. For a second, the rope slid into a glint of rock, dangling her out of the edge, stuck rigid, but Archie Kinnock was ready dangling down, unhooking the rope. Ewan could feel his strength giving out. "For God's sake, grab her now. I can't hold on much longer." He was kneeling, bruised and battered, when he felt the sling on the move again. He thought he saw her red coat bundled onto the rock, but he wasn't sure, for a huge wave crashed over his head, and he was flung over the edge into the raging sea. Exhausted, stunned by the cold water, thrashing blindly as the water rose over his head, he bounced up towards the surface, where for a brief second he bobbed and thrashed his way in the direction of the shore. So it's come at last, the final challenge. Even in extremis, he was arguing with himself. You can't fight this, forwards or backwards. You're trapped by the force. You can't last 5 minutes in this chill. You're doomed. You're doomed if you give in to defeat, he argued with himself, floundering to gain some control. You're a sailor with a few tricks up your sleeve. Fight to the end. Don't let the sea calyux drag you under. Make a fight out of it to the end. You don't want all your past life to float before your eyes. Lifted and thrown, sucked in and out, he was running out of steam. Damn the mighty swell. He was not giving in yet. Ride it like a horse, whispered a voice in his head. Ride the waves, Ewan. But then the sea would have the last word. The sea would decide his fate. Agnes, Normandy, Ken Broderick, and now this. Let the sea decide. What's happening? Yelled Min, hobbling as best she could back towards the beach, where the villagers were gathered. She had driven from Ballinotter like a mad woman to the Crannog. Someone had to tell Joanna. She didn't feel the pain in her ankle, only the terror of being away from the scene a second more than she had to. Joanna was already tearing down the lanes on her bike. She had thrown the bike down in the hedge, jumped into the car and driven while Min tried to explain about Anna and Ewan and the rescue attempts. The wee girl saved, dragged over on a rope. The lifeboat's out in the water, they're doing what they can, said her neighbour, Hector Sinclair, coming up the shingle to meet them. Is Ewan with them? Joanna was searching the rescuers. He got washed off the rock, Mistress McKinnon. The boat's out looking for him the now. Hector was straining to catch a glimpse of the lifeboat chugging over the waves from Kilfetrish harbour. Min felt sick, grabbing Joanna's arm to steady herself. He knows the sea and its tricks. All those years as a commando, he'll know what to do, she said, trying to be hopeful. He's not dressed for the sea, or hadn't you noticed? He was out to impress an old flame, Jo snapped. Why did you have to come back? I'm sorry. Min fled from her anger. I must go to my daughter. She limped as best she could across to where Anna lay swaddled in blankets. She could not see for tears of relief and fear. She scanned the waves for any sign of life, but there was nothing visible. The men were hanging off the rocks, dangling ropes and throwing lifebuoys into the water, fishing nets, anything to give Ewan a fighting chance of survival. Live, Ewan, live. You don't deserve to die. You don't deserve this after what you've done for Anna, for your child and mine, a child of love and promise. Live and we'll never bother you again. Live and I'll make no claim on you. Live and I'll let you go forever. Set you free to love Jo and the children that will surely come from you both. Live, Ewan, she willed him. Surely there's some old training you can use to ride the waves. The tide is coming in, not out. Ride the tide back to us. Come back to us now. Come back to your wife and your daughter and the woman who will love you for the rest of her life. Come back to us, Ewan. Every fibre of her being screamed the silent prayer as she hugged her baby and Harry and all the rescuers. Live, Ewan. Oh, live. The fight was over. For what seemed like hours, Ewan had thrashed against his fate, but his limbs were numb with cold and he was tired. So tired. It was time to admit defeat and let the sea have its wicked way with his battered body. Time to launch himself forth to the Tir na Nog, land over the horizon, land of the ever young. Time to lose his grip on life and see all the deeds of his life before his eyes. But the voice was still ringing in his ears. Ride on, you're not dead yet. Live, Ewan, live, live, live. We can see him, shouted Sandy. Out there, look, by the reef. How the hell has he got that far out? The policeman was jumping up and down, waving to the lifeboat chugging inland, signalling for them to turn round. Someone set off a flare to warn them. The boat chugged up and down, ploughing the sea like a furrow, throwing lines to the body floating aimlessly now in the water. Then they gathered him in their net like a huge seal, scrambled him over the side. There was a silence on the rocks, a dull, sickening silence as they waited and waited. Joanna was wrapped in blankets. Min sat with her back to the sea. She could not bear the suspense. They're trying to pump the water out of him and life back into him, but it's all too late, she thought, knowing the procedures. There was still danger, for the lifeboat was being thrown by the waves ever closer to the rocks. Then the flare went up and everyone cheered. "What's going on?" whispered Harry as Min tried to scramble to her feet. "He's alive! Thank God he's alive! He's breathing, not drowned! Oh, Harry," she said, flinging her arms round him with relief. "Ewan lives! How can we ever thank him?" Suddenly the pain in her ankle shot through her body and she was frozen to the spot. This was the moment she had been dreading, for the bargain she had struck must be fulfilled. Joanna must have the hugs and kisses and the tender nursing of him. Joanna must have Ewan to herself from now on, and they must quit Fetri without any fuss. No second chances, no regrets, no hankerings after lost love. It must be over. "Did you tell him about Anna?" Harry asked, suddenly looking weary and worried and aged. "No, I tried, but he didn't hear. What's the point of raking it all up again? You were right. But I'll tell Anna in my own time when she's old enough to understand," she sighed. There was no going back on her word. "The sooner we're off this island, the better. We've stayed far too long," Harry said, his business-like briskness covering the emotions they were both feeling. She looked at her husband. The strain of the past weeks was beginning to show. His hair was thinning, his body thickening. She had chosen him for better or worse. Their children needed him, and in a strange way, she was going to need his protection and his arms for comfort. How could she ever think of ever abandoning them all? "Let's go back on the ferry, over the water for old time's sake. Slowly with dignity so I can get used to the leaving of Fetri for good," she sighed. "You'll be back," Harry smiled, putting his arms around her shoulders. But she shook her head. "I don't think so. Not for a long time," she said, watching the lifeboat making its way to safety with its precious cargo aboard. Half her heart was in that boat, but no one must know. The happiness she would find now was in making her family contented, but would it be enough for a lifetime? The airplane was too quick a leaving. She needed time to think, to hang over the side and say farewell to her lost dreams. Chapter 6. SS the Pride of Argyle. "So this is how it's going to be. I must get used to this empty numbness." She gulped, watching the island disappear until it was a long, flat line on the horizon. Reaching out over the rails for that very last glimpse, standing with one leg strapped to the knee and a pair of crutches for support, Min was determined not to miss a second of her leave-taking. This is how grief felt when there was no hope. For once, Harry was sensitive to her need to be alone on deck. For once he was not trying to fuss over her. He was taking charge of the children below deck. She was grateful that he had taken Anna to the little makeshift hospital next to Dr. Murray's stone house to be checked over again. She was shocked, but unharmed, being made of sturdy island stock. Min had hung back, afraid, for Ewan was being kept under observation there, still unconscious, suffering from chill. He had been so close to drowning, but the signs were good, and what he needed now was rest and peace. How do you say thank you to the man who had saved your child's life? How could she tell him he had repaid the debt they owed to Agnes tenfold in saving his own daughter without creating a fuss? In the end, Harry took both the children in to see Joanna, who had not left Ewan's side all night, while Min was examined and strapped up for the journey home. It was better to stay out of sight. There were no bones broken, but the real agony she was feeling would respond to no pill but time. The pain in her ankle would pass, but now she could hardly breathe for the ache in her ribs. A wave of gratitude, anger, frustration and loss flooding over her. Not to be able to say farewell, not to be able to explain why she must never see his dear face again. So many things were to be left unsaid. How could she risk a scene by his bedside or harm his progress? The vows she had made were sacred. She would go quietly. Ewan was her crime, and Ewan was her punishment. He was out of reach now. In the purple twilight, between the daylight and darkness of this autumn afternoon, she stood on deck, a lone figure staring out to sea with eyes wide, dazed, bewildered and hurt like a frightened child. An exile watching the island waters roll into the sea as it beat onto the side of the ship, eyes searching for something that was no longer there. It came to her in the silence that this was the best it could ever be. What comes round must go round, and in coming back to Fetri, she had rounded the circle. But why had it taken half a lifetime for them to pitch up at the right place at the same time? She sensed with all her being that her place in a corner of his heart was secure, but there was space now for Joe to have the rest. Her own heart must be given to her family from now on. She was finished with passion and all that sensation. There would be no more of that. The two of them were like the tide, ebbing and flowing, pulled endlessly back and forth, but never quite returning to the same place. Like sands shifted this way and that by the currents and the forces of the wind. Nothing stayed the same unless it was dead. If only Ewan had drowned, it might be easier to mourn his passing. She sighed. How could she even think such thoughts? But to know that they must live on without seeing each other again was the ache that would never go away. It was hard enough to know that Joe would have a lifetime to explore all the joys of this talented man, while she must make do with Harry's limited appeal. So be it. That must be her choice. That was the price of Anna's rescue. They were yesterday's children, marooned on shifting sands on separate shores. Anna and Hugh were the future. They must come first from now on. They must not suffer. How could she ever have risked their happiness chasing after her own selfish dreams? The weak sun was almost gone, with just enough light to torch the sea into a shimmering silver foil. The colours made her think of Ewan's bright canvases. He would be free to fill his life capturing the beauty of the islands in his pictures. He would go on to greater things without her distracting him. It would be easy for him to forget her. But what about me? She cried. Oh, Ewan, heart of my heart, my disease and my cure, our time is over. I will always love you, but there's no honourable life now for us to build on. No more letters or meetings. No re-entering into your senses. No taking you back into mine. It is over, but the yearning for you will never go away. How can I bear to think of what might have been? We have to live with what is, and help to make what shall be. Anna and Hugh are my choice now. Harry and I will make the best of our marriage. There can be no more failure or lies. Oh, what am I to do if I'm not to limp through the rest of my life? Fill the gaps. Redirect your wandering heart back to hearth and home with all your mind and strength. Learn to sing another song. There is always the comfort of Pitlandry waiting in all its autumn glory. There might be other children to suckle. She watched the sheer waters skimming over the surface of the waves. There was something else too. Something that Moira Sanderson had said all those months ago about singing the songs of the heart, ringing in her ear. Could she go back to Moira? She could train her voice to sing the old songs, the songs of the Gaels, to find solace in making music. Sing the songs of the tide, the songs of the heart, songs of grief the seagulls called. Take your passion, and out of it will come songs of hope and love. For love is the sea without a shore. Loving never ends. It would be a lonely journey, walking the pain and grief with invisible crutches. Count your blessings, Mogoi. Children are a great distraction and solace. She smiled, hearing the lilt of her mother's voice in the singing waves as she bent over the rails to hide her tears. There was a life waiting across the water. I'll try, she whispered back into the wind. Just for now, though, she needed to be alone to practice carrying all these tormented thoughts with dignity. Min turned her face towards the harbour with hope and began to sing. Blow the wind southerly, southerly, southerly. Blow the wind south o'er the bonny blue sea. You've been listening to Daughter of the Tide by Leah Fleming, narrated by Fiona McNeill, published by Lamplight Audiobooks, an imprint of W.F. Howes Limited. This work is copyrighted 2019 Leah Fleming. This recording is copyrighted 2019 Head of Zeus.